All right, strap yourselves in because we are diving into a book that has really kind of stuck with me. The Vegetarian by Han Kang.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when I first heard the title, I was thinking, ooh, vegetarianism. Is this going to be like, all about tofu?
Right.
This is not about food.
No.
It is about so much more.
It is.
I mean, it's about rebellion and family and desire, all these things that really get under your skin, and then they just kind of like stay there.
Yeah.
And plus this book won the Man Booker International Prize.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
And one of the things that's so fascinating to me about it is how it takes this really like simple idea.
Right.
A woman deciding to stop eating meat.
Right.
And it turns it into this exploration of like these really big, huge questions about who we are as people and like who we're expected to be.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that the book does so well is it uses that really simple premise to kind of like explode outward into all of these other ideas.
Yeah, it's like this tiny little seed that grows into this giant, crazy tree.
That's a great way to put it.
And you sent in a bunch of sources that like break down these ideas, and like I was reading them and like my mind was blown.
Oh, good.
So let's like start with Yeong-hye, the main character in the book.
Okay.
And like the thing that really struck me was that her decision to go vegetarian, it's not just about the food.
Yeah.
Right? It's like this big giant no to like everything that everyone expects of her.
Yeah.
Especially as a woman in like Korean society.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like she's saying like, you want me to be this perfect wife and this perfect mother and daughter? Well, watch this.
Yeah. It's like, you want me to fit into this tiny little box? Well, I'm going to break out of the box in a way you've never seen before.
Yeah. And I think the way her family reacts to her decision really kind of underscores that conflict that she's experiencing between like her own desires and what society expects from her, right? Like you see her husband, you see her father getting increasingly frustrated with her. They try to force feed her meat at one point.
Yeah, which is so disturbing.
Oh, it's awful.
It's like they can't stand the fact that she's like defying their idea of who she should be.
Exactly. And it's almost as if they don't even see her as a person anymore.
Right.
She's just this like project that they're trying to manage.
Like she's a problem to be solved.
Exactly.
Not a person with thoughts and feelings of her own.
Yeah.
And and here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Like the whole story, the whole book, it's told from the perspectives of the people around Yeong-hye.
Right.
We never actually hear directly from her.
It's true.
It's like, what's up with that?
Right.
It's like we're deliberately kept at this distance from her.
Right.
Just like her family keeps her at a distance.
I think that's a really brilliant observation, and it's something that a lot of literary critics have pointed out about this novel, like the fact that we never get Yeong-hye's point of view.
Yeah.
It really kind of speaks to her lack of power in this situation.
Yeah, and it makes her even more mysterious.
It does.
Yeah.
And it also, it kind of makes us as readers complicit in a way, because we're only getting these very limited perspectives.
Yeah.
So we're constantly trying to like piece together who she really is based on what other people are saying about her.
Right. And like we're never quite sure if we're getting the full story.
And that's the point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think Han Kang is really playing with our expectations as readers and making us kind of confront the ways in which we judge people based on incomplete information.
Oh, totally. And this is what makes the book so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Because it forces you to think about, like, okay, well, whose story is being told here?
Yeah.
And whose story is being silenced?
Exactly.
It's like she's making us question the whole idea of perspective and truth.
Right.
And how easily those things can be manipulated.
Absolutely.
So we've got this main character, Yeong-hye, who's like completely silent throughout the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, like, what do you think Han Kang is trying to achieve with that? Like, what does Yeong-hye's silence tell us about her?
I think her silence is one of the most powerful tools that Han Kang uses in this novel.
Yeah.
And it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, I think on one hand, it definitely emphasizes how alienated she is from the people around her, how objectified she is, how nobody really seems to see her for who she truly is.
Yeah.
But I also think that silence can be seen as a form of resistance.
Oh, interesting.
Right, by refusing to explain herself, by refusing to kind of like, meet their expectations.
Yeah.
She's denying them the satisfaction of understanding her.
Oh, I see.
And she's also keeping a part of herself private, hidden from their judgment and their control.
It's like she's saying, you can try to understand me all you want, but you'll never truly get me.
Exactly.
It's interesting because that kind of reminds me of like, have you ever been in a situation where The only way to protect yourself was to just, like, stay silent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, you just don't give them the satisfaction of a response.
Right.
And that's how you hold on to, like, a little piece of your own power.
Yeah, I think we all have those moments, right? Where it's like, the less you say, the more powerful you become.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of what's happening with Yeong-hye in this book. It's like her silence is this weapon that she's using to fight back against the forces that are trying to control her.
Yeah, it's also, it creates this sense of mystery and intrigue around her character. Like, we're constantly trying to figure her out, but we never quite can.
And there's her brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Who develops this, like, really disturbing obsession with her.
Yeah, he's a fascinating and creepy character.
He's super creepy.
Yes.
And, like, one of the sources that you sent in, it actually connects his behavior to, like, a broader analysis of, like, the male gaze in Korean literature.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it talks about how women are often portrayed as, like, objects of desire, and their bodies exist, like, solely for the pleasure or artistic inspiration of men.
Right.
And it's like, the brother-in-law, he just, like, totally embodies that, right?
He does.
He's not interested in Yeong-hye as a person.
Yeah.
He's just interested in her as this blank canvas for his art.
Right,
Like, he wants to paint flowers on her body.
Yeah.
Like she's some kind of human vase or something.
And, that idea of painting flowers on her body is so interesting because on the surface, it might seem beautiful.
Right.
But underneath it, there's this real sense of control and objectification.
Yeah, it's like he thinks he can just erase her own identity.
Yeah.
And turn her into whatever he wants.
And that's really what's so disturbing about it, right? Like, he's completely disregarding her agency, her right to say no.
Yeah, and it's like this ultimate act of objectification.
It is.
Like, he's using her body for his own artistic gain without even considering her feelings or her own desires.
Exactly. And it's like he's not even seeing her as a person anymore. She's just this, like, object to be manipulated and used.
It's really messed up.
It is. It's a very unsettling dynamic.
But it's also, like, so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Because it forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about power and desire.
Absolutely.
And how they can be used to exploit and control others, especially women.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that makes this book so relevant, even though it was written in a specific cultural context.
Yeah.
These are themes that resonate with people all over the world,
Absolutely, because I think we all know someone who's been in a situation where they felt objectified or controlled in some way.
Yeah, and I think what's so powerful about The Vegetarian is that it doesn't shy away from these difficult topics, It really forces us to confront them head on.
Totally, and it makes you think about, like, okay, well, what are the ways in which we all contribute to this culture of objectification?
Right.
Even if it's just in, like, small, subtle ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a book that really stays with you long after you finish reading it, and it makes you question your own assumptions and your own behaviors.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a mark of a truly great work of art.
Totally. It's like it plants these little seeds in your mind, and then they just keep growing and growing.
And you're never quite the same after you've read it.
Right, and that's what we're here to do on this deep dive.
Yeah.
Is to plant those seeds and see what grows.
Exactly, and to hopefully start some interesting conversations along the way.
And to make you think a little bit differently about the world around you.
Absolutely.
All right, so that's Yeong-hye's brother-in-law.
Okay.
He's a creep.
He's a creep, yeah.
But he's also, like, a really important character for understanding these bigger themes that Han Kang is exploring.
Yeah, I think he's a really well-drawn character in the sense that he's both repellent and also strangely sympathetic in some ways.
Right, because he's also, like, a product of this culture.
He is, yeah.
That has taught him to see women in this particular way.
Right.
So it's like, you can't totally blame him, but you also can't excuse his behavior.
Exactly. It's a very complex situation.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting to talk about.
It is. It's one of those things where there's no easy answers.
Right.
And I think that's what makes the book so compelling.
Totally. So we've got Yeong-hye, who's like this silent rebel. We've got her family who are, like, trying to control her.
Yeah.
And then we've got this brother-in-law who's, like, objectifying her.
Right.
It's like a recipe for disaster.
It is.
But it's also a recipe for, like, an amazing book.
It is. It's a very powerful story.
And we're just scratching the surface here, people.
We are. There's so much more to unpack.
So stay tuned, because we're going to get even deeper into this crazy world of The Vegetarian.
I'm excited to dive in.
Me too.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
All right, so let's take a quick break.
Okay.
And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the even darker and more disturbing aspects of this book.
Sounds good.
So don't go anywhere.
I'll be right here.
All right, we'll be right back.
See you soon.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the vegetarian.
Yeah.
So before the break, we were talking about Yeong-hye's brother-in-law and his creepy obsession with her.
Right.
And like how it's all tied up with these ideas of objectification and control. And it's almost like he thinks he can just like erase her identity, right?
Yeah.
Just completely wipe it away and like turn her into whatever he wants.
Right. And it's interesting too because like he's the one who's seen as like the artistic genius, right?
Right.
And she's the one who's labeled as crazy for like rejecting all of this.
Yeah. It's like, is she really crazy?
Right.
I mean, everyone around her is acting so bizarrely.
Exactly. It's like the book is making us question like who gets to decide what's normal and what's abnormal.
And I think that's one of the things that makes this book so brilliant, right?
Yeah.
It's like it takes all of our expectations and then just flips them upside down here.
Totally. And it makes us wonder if maybe Yeong-hye's so-called rebellion is actually like the sanest response
Right.
to this completely messed up situation she's in.
Yeah, and it's like she's surrounded by all this like, you know, societal pressure and these like really unhealthy relationships.
Right.
And her decision to become a vegetarian is almost like this like desperate attempt to break free.
Yeah, and it's not just about the food anymore, right?
No, it's like her whole being is transforming.
Totally. And this is where the story takes a turn for even darker, right?
Oh yeah, it gets intense.
Like Yeong-hye's transformation, it goes way beyond just not eating meat.
Yeah.
Like she starts having these crazy dreams, right?
She does.
That are full of blood and violence. And she becomes convinced that she's turning into a plant. Literally.
Yeah, it's a wild transformation.
It's so wild. And I was like, what is going on here?
But then, like one of the sources you sent talked about how these dreams, they're not just random, right?
No, they're full of symbolism.
They're like symbolic, yeah.
Yeah.
And like they connect to this idea of Yeong-hye trying to escape
Right.
the pain and the control that she's experiencing.
And it's interesting because plants, you know, they often represent like growth and resilience and this like connection to nature.
Yeah.
So it's like she's trying to become something new, something that's free from all the baggage of her human existence.
Yeah, it's like she's shedding her old skin and like trying to become this like pure, untainted being.
And it's interesting how the other characters react to her transformation, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
Like her husband is like disgusted by it.
He's grossed out.
Yeah, he sees it as this further rejection of him and their marriage.
Yeah, it's like she's becoming something that he just can't understand.
Right.
And it freaks him out.
Yeah, and then her father, on the other hand, he seems almost desperate to understand her. Like he wants to bring her back to the person she used to be.
Yeah, but it's like he's going about it all wrong.
He is.
Like he's trying to force her back into the box that she's so desperately trying to escape from.
Exactly. And then there's the brother-in-law.
Oh, the brother-in-law.
Yeah, who sees her transformation as this like ultimate artistic opportunity.
Oh, God.
He becomes even more obsessed with her.
I know.
Like he wants to paint flowers directly on her body, like literally turn her into this living piece of art.
Oh my God, that scene where he tries to actually paint on her.
I know, it's so disturbing.
It's so disturbing and powerful.
It is.
And like one of the sources you sent, it talked about how that scene is like this like ultimate violation of her autonomy.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to erase her and replace her with his own creation.
Exactly. And it's just like this chilling reminder of how easily people can be objectified and manipulated.
Especially when they're seen as vulnerable or different.
Yeah. And it's not just physical violence either,
Yeah.
right? Like Yeong-hye is subjected to so much psychological pressure from her family.
Yeah.
Like they try to shame her, guilt her, diagnose her with all sorts of things. It's like they can't handle the fact that she's chosen this different path.
Yeah.
That challenges their whole worldview.
It's like she's holding up a mirror to them.
Yeah.
And they don't like what they see.
Totally. And it makes you think about like the pressures we all face to conform.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever felt like you had to change yourself to fit in?
Oh, absolutely.
Even if it meant betraying your own values.
Yeah, I think we all experience that to some degree, you know?
Yeah.
The pressure to conform can be incredibly powerful, especially when it comes from the people we love.
Right.
But Yeong-hye's story is like this stark reminder of what can happen when those pressures become too overwhelming, you know, when we're denied the space to be our true selves.
And it makes you wonder, like, at what point does trying to fit in become self-destructive?
Right.
And at what point does rebellion become like the only path to freedom?
It's a tough question.
It is a tough question, and this book really makes you wrestle with it.
It does, and I think that's what makes it so powerful and so important.
So we get this character, Yeong-hye, who's like rejecting everything. Her family, her husband, her culture, even her own body.
Right.
Like she's trying to transform herself into something completely different.
Yeah.
Something that's free from all the pain and the violence of the world.
It's a radical transformation.
It is radical. And it's like she's saying, you know,
like if you won't accept me for who I am,
yeah,
then I'll become something else entirely, something you can't control.
Exactly. And that brings us to the ending.
Okay.
Which is, let me tell you, one of the most ambiguous and thought-provoking endings I've ever encountered.
It's true. Han Kang doesn't give us any easy answers.
Yeah.
Now, we're left wondering, like, does she find peace in her transformation?
Yeah.
Does she escape the violence and control that have been haunting her?
Right.
Or is her struggle just beginning?
I know. And one of the sources I was reading interpreted the ending as this kind of like hopeful transcendence.
Okay.
Where Yeong-hye like finally achieves this state of freedom and connection with nature.
Yeah, I can see that interpretation.
But then like another source argued that it's like a much darker ending.
Yeah.
And that her transformation is actually like a form of mental breakdown.
Right.
Brought on by like all the trauma that she's experienced.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the ending so brilliant.
Yeah.
Like it's open to interpretation.
Right.
And it really depends on like your own worldview and your own experiences.
Totally.
And, you know, I think that's what makes Han Kang such a great writer. Like she doesn't give us easy answers. You know, she really forces us to think for ourselves.
It's like she's holding up this mirror to us.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, what do you see?
How do you interpret this?
What does it tell you about the way you view the world?
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful challenge, especially in a world where we're constantly bombarded with like easy answers and quick fixes, you know?
Yeah, everyone wants like a simple solution.
Right.
But the vegetarian doesn't offer any of that.
No, it's messy.
It's messy.
And it's complicated.
It's complicated.
And it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable and it stays with you, right?
Yeah.
Long after you finish it.
Absolutely. It makes you question everything you thought you knew.
Yeah, about yourself.
About yourself, about the people around you, about the world. And I think that's a mark of a truly great work of art, you know?
Totally. It's like it plants these little seeds in your mind and then they just keep growing and growing.
And you can't unsee them.
And you're never quite the same.
Yeah.
So to bring this back to you, dear listener,
yeah,
what do you think happens to Yeong-hye after the book ends? Does she find peace or does her struggle continue?
And what does her story tell you about the pressures to conform and the lengths we go to in order to be ourselves?
You know, those are questions that I'm still wrestling with. Yeah, me too.
And I think they're questions that are worth thinking about long after we finish this deep dive.
Absolutely. And as you reflect on those questions, I'd encourage you to think about the quiet rebels in your own life.
Yeah.
The people who challenge the status quo, who march to the beat of their own drum.
The people who don't fit in.
Yeah. How do you treat them? Do you try to understand them or do you try to silence them?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think the answer to that question might reveal more about yourself than you realize.
That is deep.
Yeah, it's something to think about.
It is something to think about, and it's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah, I think so too.
So if any of this resonated with you, I highly recommend checking out The Vegetarian.
Yeah, it's a challenging read.
It is challenging, but it's so worth it.
It is. It's one of those books that will stay with you.
It will stay with you. And that wraps up our deep dive into this fascinating
Unsettling
and unforgettable world of The Vegetarian.
Until next time, keep diving deep.